What's up, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Bad Religion, and we're going to listen to an album I haven't yet reacted to yet. And this is based on a request from one of the greatest friends of the channel, Ryan. He mentioned he wouldn't mind seeing a reaction to a track from True North called Past is Dead. It's awesome because, again, it was right about the time where I'm thinking, I've done a lot of Bad Religion reactions, but the vast majority have been their tunes from the 80s, 90s, to a limited extent, like early 2000s, but I really do want to react to more post-2000 Bad Religion, including their three most recent studio albums, as well as the Christmas album. I mentioned this before. I love the irony and the sort of comedy that they've released, the Christmas album, which is actually like, they turned some of these Christmas carols into like good punk rock tunes, but I mentioned I'm going to react to that one, closer to December. It just would make sense. But I do want to react to, True North, The Descent of Man, and The Age of Unreason, because these albums deserve to be discussed. I mentioned in one of my reactions that I don't know them as well as the other ones. I have listened to them all many times, or at least multiple times. But it's not like Suffer, No Control, Against the Grain, Generator, Recipe for Hate, where I've been listening to these songs for going on just about 30 years now, not quite, but almost. So yeah, these songs I know to a certain extent, and both sonically and lyrically, but I may not be able to speak about them in as great a detail. But this one is one that did stick out when I listened to this album. Now I should point out, I got all three of the. No, that's not true. It was just two. No, it's the Christmas album too. So I got Descent of Man, True North, and the Christmas album as part of these like vinyl plus CD releases. Now, I mentioned before, at the end of grad school, like, financial times were hard, so I ended up having to sell a bunch of vinyl, including punk rock vinyl. So in all three of those cases, I hung on to the CD while selling the vinyl, but the CD came in like just a little paper sleeve, like it's a both medium sort of release, but it didn't give you the like proper CD case. So for all of these CDs, I just have the CD itself, and it's in a generic like jewel case. So I don't have the sleeve or the artwork, unfortunately. I did like, well, that's the artwork was like the big fold out, but when I wanted to sell the records, I didn't want to be the one person who in the list of people selling it was like, oh, by the way, I don't have the poster for you, so on. So I included it, when I sold them. So a bit unfortunate, but again, it was, decisions had to be made. But yeah, we're going to listen to a tune, Past is Dead. I remember a couple things, like sonically, I remember it's one of those that has kind of like an atmospheric intro, and I think there's even like another moment where it's sort of like halting and atmospheric, but it is a very driving and fast, like classic, melodic hardcore Bad Religion tune. And lyrically, it's funny, what I do remember, as I grab my tea, what I do remember is it looks at the past and the concept of perspective on time, particularly relevant to past, present, and future. That sort of, not dichotomy, I guess, but that sort of rendering of time and three different perspectives. Looking back in the moment and looking forward. It manifests that on a couple different levels. Like, it begins by talking about sort of your personal life and saying like, the only way essentially to get through life is to learn how to forget or just put to bed your failures, your shortcomings, your transgressions, the mistakes you made, and the things that you said which turned out not to be true, and so on. And if you just let them fester and you constantly keep looking at them, then ultimately, you're going to go insane. So the only way to make it, the only way to measure your success, I think is the line in life, is by your ability to forget your failures. But when that manifests on the larger level, on the level of society, we're talking about the way in which, like, there are certain monuments, in some cases like literal statues, which commemorate the past. And for, some sectors of society, and maybe sort of the dominant ethno-cultural sort of sector of society, they may, elevate those monuments to great significance and, celebrate and sort of worship them, even though not everyone's on the same trajectory. Not everyone may integrate with those icons and monuments in the same way or see them in the same way. And ultimately, it makes the point that some of these sort of like dominant groups that want to celebrate certain things in the past, even things that by other perspectives are unsavory or indicative of antiquated thinking and so on, they're fine with not really having to look beyond their own perspectives. They're fine with having intellectual poverty, is I think the sort of the line in the song. But ultimately, the narrator, and it even says, sort of the world itself, is imploring people to stop looking at the past, whether you're celebrating it or being upset by it or so on. The idea is that you have to sort of look forward. You got to think about tomorrow and not yesterday, which is another song by Bad Religion. I have reacted to it, although a long time ago, a few months ago. But yeah, it also makes the point though that decisions will continue to be subject to variables and ambiguity or opacity of a situation, meaning mistakes will still be made, bad decisions will still be made. And I think there's even a line about my next decision could be the end of the world. So it's like saying essentially, we need to stop commemorating and focusing on the past, and on a personal level that's kind of the only way to get through life and to be a successful person. But also as a society, when we do that, we have to recognize that people will continue to make bad decisions, and doing so without having all the facts and not even caring to have all the facts, just almost celebrating their intellectual poverty again. So ultimately, even though we need to focus on tomorrow, I think the song is also making the case that we could still wipe ourselves out, even if we sort of shift from a sort of back-looking perspective to a forward-looking one. And again, people are on different trajectories, so there's some people who want to look back at certain things and be excited about them, and other people who would very much like to turn the page, put them to bed, and move on. So yeah, it's a song that I think gets at the concept of the passage of time and the sort of framing of time, again, past, present, future, from a couple different angles. Like I said, I think there's even a couple lines where it sort of personifies the earth, or sort of the human world, and saying hey, stop looking at the past, focus on tomorrow. So yeah, there's some different layers to it, and I do appreciate that idea that it's not healthy to beat yourself up over things 15 years ago that you can't really do anything about, although I do sometimes struggle with that. But by the same token, it's also not great to sort of look back and navel gaze at oh, wasn't it great when I got that award for my academic accomplishments, or when I scored that goal where he won the tournament or whatever. It's navel gazing. It's you're essentially celebrating things that don't matter to people on other trajectories and so on. And ultimately, if you're insisting that people worship that sort of icon in the same way that you do, then you're ultimately failing to appreciate that there are perspectives beyond your own. So I think it's again, the degree to which the themes can manifest both personally and socially in this one is fantastic, the degree, the singular, right? So is fantastic. But yeah, bottom line, this is an album that I don't know as well, but this is one of the tunes that sort of stuck out to me when I first heard it. So shout out to Ryan. Let's get to it. This is Bad Religion from their, I think, 2013? Yeah, 2013 album, True North. It's called Past is Dead.
Solemn regret, transgressions fill my head. A measure of success is how well to forget, and the past is dead.
Sounds like wonderful Bad Religion. Yeah, it's the trash and the rot of the past builds up. not bad for a song from a punk band 33 years after they got started. Yeah, it's fantastic. I really do enjoy it. It's interesting. Again, I remember this song much more than several others on the album, even though I have listened to the album. So, as I go through this album, there's going to be a few where, like, it's going to be more me kind of like speculating about the title than actually like remembering lines from the song. But this was a good way to come into this album. Once again, shout out to Ryan, because it is one that stood out to me more in terms of remembering some of the themes. But yeah, I think it has that classic Bad Religion melodic hardcore sound. I like that introduction, the sort of, there's a few songs where they do that, where they sort of lead in with a more like slow and sort of suspenseful kind of intro. But yeah, I really do enjoy the way it just bursts to life, and it just has that classic sound. Love that guitar solo where it sort of went up really high right before kicking back in. Yeah, a top tune. And once again, I'm excited to start going through True North and Descent of Man and Age of Unreason. Listen to some recent Bad Religion, or relatively recent. Again, we are listening to an album that's 9 years ago now. But yeah, like I said, let me know if there's another tune on any one of those albums you'd like to hear. Other than that, I will see you next time. Peace.